Well, I'll press record and then... So, welcome to Discover Energy Work. I'm Richard Wicks, and I'm here not for the first time with Katie Larson. Now, I've got to say, I'm a bit like in the shadows if you're watching on YouTube, because the internet at my guest house is not very good, and now I'm in Om Garden Cafe, who are sponsoring this episode, like unwittingly. No, I did talk with the owner. And Katie is a transformational, has a PhD in transformational learning. So I also call her Dr. Katie. So good morning, Dr. Katie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. I'm doing well. I'm here in a chilly Hong Kong November morning.
Oh, I love those chilly Hong Kong November mornings. That's great. So last time, it was so funny because it was lovely talking to you, but you kind of interviewed me. So people, what I've probably done is I don't know yet because I haven't published that episode yet and haven't done the editing, but I'm probably going to cut all of your story out. So,
that's okay.
So
I'll remember it. It's my story.
Exactly. So you've got a big story, actually. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where to start with you. I mean, I know that you start as
me too.
really early. So do you want to just firstly introduce, you're a transformational coach, you're a doctor in transformational learning, you're a coach for...
Sure, I'll give you my professional credentials.
Highly sensitive people, and yeah, give us your professional credentials.
I'll give you my professional credentials, and then I'll go back in time and show you how I got them. But yes, I am Dr. Katie Larson, and I'm the founder of Growth Quest, and I'm a growth coach who works with highly sensitive people, empaths, and intuitives. And it's because I myself am all three of those, and probably other names of things that we don't even know about yet.
Yeah.
And it's been quite a journey for me to really embrace those aspects of me. And so I now help others not only embrace those traits, but really thrive in the world as these types of people. And so I'll go back in time and I'll share about little Katie. And I think we talked about how I was born curious, but really in adult terms now we would call me a seeker. I've always been a seeker. I've always been curious. And I think that, manifested in itself different ways. And I was always in the library as a little kid, and my book choices were always on the fringe. I loved UFOs and Bigfoot and ghosts and astrology and esoteric things, even as an 8-year-old. And the librarian knew me so well. She would keep little book stacks for me on the side. And I think there was something, when I would read it, I almost felt connected to a wisdom that I knew before. And so this also ties into, as a kid, I had past life memories. And I didn't always know they were past life memories at the time, but they were things that I shouldn't or couldn't have known otherwise. And I used to love playing in nature. So we lived on a lake, and I loved being in nature, and I would play on the shore, and there was a beautiful oak tree next to the shore, and I would build a hut made of sticks, and it came very natural to me. I would put all of these sticks on the tree, and then I would layer littler sticks and moss and mud, and I would create this shelter, and I would crawl in it. And when I was doing that, I would get these memories of skinning a rabbit. And everything that you would need to do to skin a rabbit with a sharp stone, and how you'd have to separate the skin from the fat and pull off the hair. And it's these aren't things that I was doing as Katie, but I would have these 6, 7, 8, 9, in that range.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
It was very visceral memories, where it was almost, I reckon, maybe if you watch a film nowadays and then the character has a flashback, it was I would be in my real life, but then I'd have these flashbacks to a different life. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I did sometimes make comments to my parents, and I would say things like, I hope I'm not an alcoholic this time. And they say, what do you mean this time? And I'd say, I've been one before. and when I would say it, I could even remember like the feelings with it of like being very lonely, being like taking alcohol as a way to like calm myself down. And again, I'm 9-10 years old,
But
and I
can I
just
ask
have these
you,
experiences. And
I'm fascinated
please,
at that. So you're a 9-10-year-old saying something like that. Was there ever a part of you that said, this isn't normal, or this is like, that was a funny thing.
not yet.
That was a funny thing I just said. No.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe the older I got to be in the preteens, I started to realize that was weird. And my parents really appeased me nicely. I think they would make jokes sometimes, like maybe we all were Indians in another life, or like they would joke with me and encourage me. But they also would roll their eyes like, oh, Katie, that's Katie being silly again. But so this is happening at the same time as I am one of these people who loves the world. I just have a lust for life and a lust for, I'm insatiably curious. And so, the books is one thing, but nature and just being out in the world exploring was just, it would make me high. I would be from the minute I would get home from school, outside, exploring in the world, and just, really watching a katydid walk across for minutes, and really being fully immersed in nature and just absolutely loving it.
A katydid, that sounds like you did something. A katydid is
I know. That was a nickname I got, but it's a really funny nickname I got as a kid. When, you know what a bouncing castle is? Like those bouncing castles that little kids. Yeah. When I was little, I must have been like 7. I jumped in it too hard and I fell in the corner and the whole thing collapsed. And then they say, who broke the bouncing castle? Katie did. Katie did. Katie did. So it was one of my nicknames for a really silly reason. But yeah, there's a bug. There's also a bug called a katydid. And we had a lot of them by our house growing up. They're just basically big green leaf-shaped bugs, and I just love them. And I also felt connected to animals and just non-speaking things like trees. And I felt like I could feel their energy. And it's interesting because now I understand it from the empath perspective. But then you just think it's normal. Like everybody can feel this. And I think these are just some of the signs I have as a young person, that I was able to pick up on these energies. And I also was able to pick up on moods. And I also have what I now know is synesthesia. And so this is actually part of your book when you were mentioning layers, the layers of perception. Someone with synesthesia experiences connections with senses and perceptions that maybe somebody else may not. So for example, when I taste something, it has a shape associated with it, and I could draw the shape very easily. Or when I walk into the room, I could map out the feelings in the room of the energy. And I even could tell, like, that person's dense, that person has a dense energy, and that person's not in a good space. This person has a light energy. And I also thought that was normal, right? And but also
can I
maybe didn't have phrases to it.
Sorry, I'm being awful, but I want to give my book, everybody, it's called Tao's DNA, and because people won't know that. And I mean, totally. And I think, what's funny is I think that's where we want to go, exactly where you are. I think we're all trying to, intelligence is actually, I've got a good term for you. It's been going through my head, which is, intelligence is where we're able to see things from more than one direction. So we don't look at it as fixed, and we're able to, we have a flexi mind,
Yes.
I was listening to Ingo Swann, and he's talking about psychic perception, and we can't define it, and yet we can't even define what is our perception. normal perception. So yeah.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I mean,
Right.
you realize you have synesthesia. That would
Don't be. I think that when I was reading, and synesthesia is interesting when you study it more, because people with synesthesia are known to have thin boundaries or experience more anomalies, which can be interpreted or felt as paranormal or metaphysical.
right.
And I do think that I also experience things that maybe a non-sensitive person would. So for example, again, back to childhood, I knew when my grandparents died. I just knew, and I'll never forget it. I remember I was in 7th grade, so you're like, 12, and I was walking down the hallway at school, and I just knew. I said, oh, my grandma just died, and I just teared up a little bit. And then, I lived my day, and then I returned home, and I got home, and everybody was home from work early. And they said, Grandma died today. And I said, I know. I know.
Did you
and
have
they're like,
siblings?
How do you know?
Did you have siblings?
Yes.
So
I have a
was
sister,
it just
an older
you?
sister.
Or was she like, I don't know what Katie's talking about. Why is she saying these things?
She's very interesting because she has similar tendencies that express themselves differently.
Oh, okay.
So my sister's in law enforcement, and my sister has the ability to smell bad people, like criminals. She can tell when you're lying, but she can tell if you have done it. Like, she knows if you've done it. And I think that was probably something she struggled with a lot as a kid, because
we lie a lot. Yeah.
Lots of people lie.
And we all lie. It's a social phenomena. Like, somebody gets their hair cut and we don't like it, and we say, "Oh, that's a nice new haircut," and like, because
and I think that was really hard for her growing up. The phoniness of like the necessary phoniness and the pretentiousness that we have as like a culture. And
now we're on mobile phoniness.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's a joke on mobile phone, but like we get a phony WhatsApp text of how somebody's saying something, or Facebook is totally phony. Yeah, mobile phony.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah. And that is a challenge for empathic and sensitive people, because we pick up on what you're not saying. Right. Like, and I think
I hid in it. I gotta say, I hid in it. I went, okay, so cool. Apparently, this is a cool thing to do. But I think we're also cutting off our nose to spite our face when we're doing that. We're kind of cutting ourselves off.
And what's strange is, I think at some point you recognize that it's the game that everyone's playing. And then some people can mimic the game better than others who are sensitive. And I think those that mimic it, you can do so well, but at some point it catches up with you and it exhausts you.
Yeah.
And you don't know why. You can't pinpoint that's the reason it's exhausting you, because you're playing the game. Right? But at some point you realize, oh, I'm not living as authentically as I'd like to be. But it can be so exhausting, you have to play the game, or you would be constantly exhausted.
Yeah, I think, knowing you've got a science background, I'm thinking like that would be such an interesting study to see, for example, put a test together where you get people to be phony and you check their stress levels after being phony, and you check them to just being themselves and check their stress levels. I mean, we know the answer, but Oh, and I wanted to say, in German, there's a really interesting expression. If you don't like somebody, you say, "I can't smell them. Like, they smell so bad. I can't. Don't bring them in. They stink." Yeah.
That's cute.
Yeah, and
okay, actually, let's keep going with smell for a minute, though.
Yeah,
Can we go with smell?
Yeah. Yes, sure.
Because all right, let's go to particle wave, right? So as we all love in energy work, we constantly think of energy as frequencies, right? But as we also know, energy can be particles. And one of the particles that we're picking up on when we are communicating with somebody is their pheromones. And when we do a study on taking the sweat samples of people who are engaged in a variety of activities. So for example, they did a study where people would be right about to jump out of an airplane and they would swab their sweat. Yeah. And then they give that sweat to a subject. When the subject smells those pheromones, their mirror neurons in their brain light up as the same area of, oh my God, I'm about to jump out of an airplane, of anxiety and of fear and frustration. And so it is energetic, but it's also to the point where it's molecular, right? And so sometimes, like when we walk into a room and you just know, like, oh my God, there's been a fight here. And people go, what do you mean there's been a fight here? Like literally 5 minutes ago, whoever was just in this room, there was a fight. You're either still picking up on the frequency of energy that was like left there, or maybe you're literally smelling their testosterone, their cortisol, their pheromones that they're leaving. And so I think that one part of being a highly sensitive person by definition is you're more aware of the subtleties than other people. And I find that I sometimes will pick up on these things and it's like, you don't know where you're getting it from. But the more you learn about things that you could be picking it up on, you're like, oh, maybe it's that. You know, like maybe I'm smelling somebody's fear.
I've got a story for you. So when I was learning with my, this was like 30 years ago, I was learning with my Tai Chi teacher, the Wu Wei master. And when you learn Wu Wei, like a side effect of it sometimes is your perception channels just start opening. Mine opened in my hands more, so I was able to use my hands to feel like different energies. And he said he had one student whose tongue opened and he could taste energies. So he would like have somebody standing in front of them and he'd sit completely silently, but in his mouth, he's licking them. In his mind, he's licking them. And he would get impressions, and he could do it. He could lick people from a distance. It sounds a bit weird.
It's really funny.
But
no, not at all. I have a follow-up story. Keep going.
Yeah, well, no, it was so funny because he said, like, you know, everybody's holding their hands and it looks like they're doing something. This guy's kind of way more impressive. He's sitting completely silently and just, you have a problem there. And then, oh, you have a problem there.
So interesting.
So that was his magic tongue, as it were, his psychic tongue.
And see, I love these stories because it's like, you just have to trust that that's your thing, right? Because, you know, I had a thing once where maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I was just becoming more brave to test my natural born intuitive abilities, okay? And so when I was working with a client, I couldn't stop tasting olives. Like I couldn't get it out of my mouth. And what I was learning was when I get these weird, like out of nowhere sensations, I have to bring it up in a session or I'm just going to think about it all day long. And so I said to her, oh, and I also saw visually her in a swimsuit. Couldn't stop seeing it. So I said, okay, here, I got to ask, what's the deal with the olives? Please tell me these have something to do with you. And she goes, oh my gosh, Katie, I had the worst day ever yesterday. So I went home that night and I booked a trip to the south of France, bought myself a new swimsuit. And the whole time I was doing it, I ate a jar of olives, a whole jar. Oh, wow. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And so it's like, I couldn't not say it, but it was like, maybe we have, as sensitive or empathic people, or intuitive, all three, we get these messages and it's whether or not you're paying attention to them that you're going to get validation that these are real.
I have to say, and actually I wanted to say in your introduction, because you said you work with highly sensitive people. I have to say, like, how we deal with our own sensitivity is so massively influential on our mental health,
Very
and
much, yes.
whether we're going to be a success. Because you know, we talk about Edison and Einstein and Jobs. Their success comes from seeing directly, like, oh, I have a vision, I have to do this. Yeah, I mean, if Jobs, you know, had stayed in business school, I think he was in business school, instead of like focusing on calligraphy and like that sort of stuff, we wouldn't have Apple.
Right.
And he didn't go, oh, this is crazy, I shouldn't be doing this. It's like, yeah, no, this is something I need to do. And so like I see you as so important and so key what you're doing, and especially, which is kind of like to go, because we talk really about your childhood in a lot of ways, is, you know, this, we need to nurture the kids that they're okay with what they feel. Yeah, because adults, I'm not. I mean, I'm still dealing with my own issues, and what I feel, and trying to fit in with society. In some ways I kind of, you know, withdraw, because it's like,
and we always will, I think.
Yeah.
I think you always will. Yeah, because we're a minority, right? By statistics, we are only 20% of the population, and maybe it's higher, but you know, with original studies and follow-up studies, it seems we're about 1 in 5. So it's like 1 in 5 of us are feeling the world stronger, deeper, and more intensely than the rest of the 80%. And so I think for me personally, always what gets everyone's attention first about high sensitivity are the squeaky wheels. It's the annoying stuff. Like you know, mine is always, my physical senses are heightened, and sometimes that's really annoying to me. Like my poor husband, like he can't get certain brands of deodorant because I'll be like, get away from me. Like that deodorant doesn't work for me. Go get the other one that we know works, you know, like, because it's just too intense and it's too many weird smells, you know.
Yeah.
But what happens is we tend to pathologize the squeaky wheels, because we say there's something wrong with me, I'm oversensitive, and this goes both emotional sensitivity and physical sensitivity. We want to be like the 80% who don't have the problems, because those squeaky wheels, they're the ones that really need our attention. And so sometimes I think those squeaky wheels are great because they get us into recognizing that this is a cluster of traits that's not only well researched, but it's also really positive. And like you mentioned, Steve Jobs and a couple other people, like high sensitivity has been called other things throughout history, right? Like we are the visionaries, we're the healers, we're the storytellers, the creative, the priests. We're those characters that make the society run. And if it weren't for our extra abilities, like we wouldn't have been as successful as we are as a population of humans, right? So I agree with you. I think part of it is, you know, we're always going to have challenges. Like it's just part of the package. We're always going to have challenges, but there are ways, and we can talk about this as the interview goes on, but there are ways to like hack your sensitivity into the good side and the superpowers of it, and really benefit from that. And these are people, I think myself included, who we thrive in our sensitivities.
Right. Well, I mean, I also, I mean, I could see the episode, I've sort of, in my mind, I've said like, we have to call this like superpower coach, or, you know, X-Men coach, or, you know, whatever. It's like, it's because, you know, what you're doing, I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm like, why, I can't believe I didn't meet you in Hong Kong. Like, I cannot believe it.
I know. We've tried to, and we run in the same circles, and we know certain people, and
but also, I mean, I recognize that story about like, it's very difficult for our world, you know, our environment, because, you know, we love the people we love, we just do. And then somebody will say to me, oh, so I know you like this, so I got it for you. And I'm like, check the energy of it. And I'll go, but not that one.
Oh my God. Yes, that's how I am with gifts. I'm probably the worst person to give gifts to because of that.
Or restaurants, you like this restaurant, and I check energetically. So apparently today it's not strong for me. So, or it's not, there's no energy there for me. So if we go there, it's not going to work out well. let's go somewhere else. And it's like, how do other people deal with, you know, our sensitivity? It's quite it's another fascinating topic. But
yeah, and a lot of us have childhood memories of being the difficult child, right? And being the one that like will be the stick in the mud because of your sensitivities. Like, for example, like I love carnivals and I love festivals until I don't. Right? Like I will reach a point, and so will all sensitive people, where you become overstimulated, because the same stimulation that's so exciting, like the flashing lights and being on the roller coaster and the food and the sugar and everything, the same stimulation that for the people in the 80% is like you can have that on repeat and not get tired of it. For the 20% of us who are really sensitive nervous systems, we take it in, and then we just hit a wall. And I remember like going to like amusement parks or going to like festivals and being like, I love it, it's so great. And then 5 minutes later, like, I want to go home. We have to leave now. And it's like you remember your family being like, oh God, really? We have to leave because she wants to leave, or making you stay. And then you feel really overstimulated and then have a terrible time, and it's almost, you know, semi-traumatic.
Yeah,
and
you
so
shut down.
we can be difficult. Yeah.
I mean, there's two things which come to mind about that. One of them I forgot, but well, you know, I haven't forgotten. It's gaslighting. So essentially, we early on, like, know what you're feeling is not real, and then we start to tell ourselves, know what you're feeling is not real. Like somebody walks in, you got a feeling about somebody, and you go, but like that guy is a really good guy, you know. It's like, I remember my father had a business colleague, and it's like, it's got the blackest energy, and it's like so nice, such a nice guy, and my dad's getting better and better friends with him, you know, on a more friends level. And I'm like, wow, like, watch out for this guy. Like, count your fingers if you shake hands with him. Like, this is just not a good guy. And I don't know why. Maybe it's okay in business, but like, you should be definitely careful of this person. And the second one was, you know, I had let's say when I was a child, I met another child who was killing snails, and he said, I'm doing it to harden myself. So essentially, I know it's awful. It's like a psychopath in the making.
Right.
Essentially, he's so sensitive that he wants to cause harm. So part of him will die. Part of him will shut off. So he's able to deal with the world. And I wonder how many of us, you know, go through that process with ourselves. Of like, say, I need to
gaslighting 100%. Yeah.
I'm gonna hurt something because it's gonna shut down after that. It's gonna like, I reject these feelings. I reject my feelings. I reject, you know, nature and feeling so touched by it because it's gonna die. So I'm gonna kill it. It's like, whoa. And it took me a long time to understand that was not a good idea at all, because I had no frame of reference. And, you know, what you and I think we want to do is help people have a frame of reference, just so they feel a little bit stable, in, you know, when things are starting to feel really unstable. It's like, okay, that's really normal. Hearing voices, you know, but you don't know where they're from. It's like, and all this kind of stuff.
There's a lot of bravery involved in speaking out about the way you experience the world when you're in this minority, because then what it becomes is, obviously, you're opening yourself up for criticism, right? And that hurts more as a sensitive person. So you feel people's criticism more, and you do gaslight if you're not comfortable enough, because you say, I experienced this is my phenomenological truth of the world. And then someone says, well, I've never experienced that, so that's not true. And what is interesting about intuitives and empaths and sensitives is we are more likely to be, you know, the Kruger-Dunning effect, where you're like, you know, you because you're aware of the complexities of the world, highly sensitive people are more aware of what they don't know, so they have more likely to be imposter syndrome, because they're like, well, I don't know everything. Like, I know a lot, but I don't know everything, so maybe I shouldn't speak out and I shouldn't become an expert on this, because what do I know? Whereas, somebody who doesn't know what they don't know is like, I'm an expert, listen to me, right? So we have a lot of risk involved in speaking out about our experience. But what I have found is when I've spoken out, people come out of the woodwork and say, that's me too. And even I'm starting to make connections. So we'll go back to my after I was a child, I became a science teacher. And so as this naturally curious person.
We're going to have part 1 and part 2, I think. Katie Larson's like, this is
maybe
too big. Sorry, you don't fit in an episode.
I might have a 3-stager.
Oh, yeah. Well, we got, there's a whole aspect of like your experiences and even like talking about the methodology, that would give people an idea of how to frame their experiences. Because I'm so, whilst writing the book, I became so clear about, humans need structure. Humans make structures, and we invent new structures, and it's because we need structures, so we get a feeling of stability, and
we feel safer in a structure. Yeah,
definitely. There was something I was going to say, but I can't remember. It's just too many things being said at once.
I know. I'll go back to what I was about to say about being a science teacher.
Yes.
Because I've made connections now, because a lot of the things that you do when you first realize you're sensitive is you go back and you reframe your past through the lens of sensitivity, right? And then you're like, oh my God, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. But just to connect the storyline, because I was so naturally curious and I love the nature and things like that, I studied biology, and I was a biologist, and then I was a science teacher, physical science, chemistry, and biology, high school. And when I was teaching, sure, I loved the content and I loved, being a teacher. It was great. It was the best job ever. But I noticed that I would always attract certain types of people, but mostly they were sensitive boys. And I had sensitive girls that were attracted to me as well, but I often had in my classroom after school helping me clean the lab, asking me about philosophical questions, talking to me about, these types of subjects. These boys that now looking back, I can see they were sensitive boys in a high school that didn't value sensitivity, and they felt comfortable with my energy and my openness and my acceptance of their sensitivity. And what's really interesting is now these boys are in their late 20s, early 30s, and we're still in touch, right? So they're men now, and I've reached back out to some of them as a result of being in this role and doing research for my own book. And they said, I give them the quiz, and they're all off the charts. And they say, oh my gosh, that's me. That's my whole life. This is the challenges that I've had, right? Is that I've always felt safer with people who could talk deeply about something. And I always felt safer with someone who could show their emotions openly. And it's like, I find now looking back, like I always wondered, like, why did I have this like handful of characters that were my people as a teacher? Why did I attract these kids? And now looking back, I'm like, they felt safe in their sensitivities with me.
Wow. This is a test that is that like an open test? Like, can anybody find that? Because I mean, I think if I said to people like, well, first of all, if you think you might be sensitive, I didn't even know there's a test. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, there's a test. So there's one on my website, growthquest.com, but there's also the original test, which is Dr. Elaine Aron's website. I think it's hspperson.com. And it'll just show you, I think it's out of 26 questions, and I'm 25 out of 26. And you will just see how many tendencies, because high sensitivity is a cluster of traits. And they're so disparate at first, like they don't seem like they connect, right? Like you think deeply about something is one, you get overstimulated easily is another, you emotionally pick up on people's energies and energies of the room, and you sense subtleties, right? And at first glance, some of those connect, like, okay, I'm sensitive to subtlety, so I'm going to get more emotional or overstimulated easily. That connects. But I never put 2 and 2 together about my love for deep processing as a high sensitivity trait. If you give me a topic like crop circles, I will go into a deep dive of crop circles for 2-3 weeks, and I would like chew, it's like chewing gum to my brain. Like I will just love every minute of it, and I will go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And honestly, that's why I was successful getting a PhD and a master's degree, because you can do the research and you're interested because you love the depth of processing. But I would have never have, had I not learned about high sensitivity, connected that we are the people who enjoy the layers of complexity and the curiosity of the world. You know, it's like, that's why I loved those books as a kid.
Yeah, and it's such a scientific trait as well, actually. You know, I'd say almost ironically, because, but I don't really feel, I think science is doing itself short in many ways, the way it's done nowadays, because I feel that science is about not knowing. I think we talked about this a little bit last time. And then, you know, we literally can go deeper, deeper, deeper. And yeah, I mean, we find like whole new areas and realities, because we've got that, I don't know, that X factor, yeah, which is working on our side.
I think one thing that I really needed as a personal philosophy to understand in my later years was understanding phenomenology. Because when I was a scientist, I was really dedicated to understanding like a little bit more materialistic hard data, the numbers, you know, this tool gave me this printout of this data, therefore this is the reality. And when I went into my PhD and I had to choose the methodology that I was going to use for my research, one that I was introduced to was phenomenology. And now for anybody that doesn't know that word, and it's such a fun one to say, phenomenological truth, right? Phenomenology is just the study of direct experience. And in reality, that is the beginning of all knowledge, is somebody had direct experience with something, they communicated about it, and then there's studies that snowball off of that. And some of those studies, they can now acquire hard evidence or like, you know, tools and ways to measure it, and that's great. Yes. But some is only pure direct experience. And that's the side of me that I was like not as strong in, is trusting that phenomenological truth.
Right.
And so I really went to that direction. It's almost more of a humanities-based research of understanding people's stories. Because when you understand people's stories, that's the truth. Maybe it's a little bit more subjective, but it's still an experience that is undeniable to that person. And if that's, you know, now we learn more and more, like, okay, we're in the 20%, we're in the minority. So think about every other type of group of people that are in little minorities. And if we're really truly listening to their stories, then you're getting phenomenological truth that is so much more important to understand than whatever data you have in the majority. Because if you're sitting here and people are telling you, like, you know, I'm telling people, like, I've seen a ghost, I've seen an elf, I've seen this, and it was very real, and people, you know, but where's the data? Where's your photo evidence? Where's the things that I can measure? But it's still truth.
Well, I do like what Winston Churchill said. So there's two responses that I have to that. Winston Churchill said, statistics are very revealing. They're like a bikini. They're very revealing, but they hide the most important things. Yeah.
I don't know that one. That's good.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing him. But also, you know, Ingo Swann, I'm going back to Ingo because I'm just a big fan of Ingo's.
I like Ingo Swann too.
He was in the being a subject for psychic research, and psychic research, as you can almost say, is like, it doesn't go looking where psychic phenomena is. It says we want to bring it into the laboratory where it really doesn't happen very much, and then say, well, look, it's not happening here, so that it doesn't exist. It's like,
it's not real.
Hey, dummies, yeah. And Ingo said, well, let me tell you my process. Let me tell you what I was going through as I'm trying to perceive this. Because although I didn't get the target, when I now know what the target is, I was going through a process, and actually I was getting hits. And then from there, he became this sort of psychic superstar that then became part of the Stargate psychic spying thing. But I mean, yeah, right. And the other thing is, like, when somebody is seeing ghosts or seeing elves or seeing whatever, and they're kind of freaking out about it, can they reach out to you, or you say, like, okay, first thing, go and see a psychiatrist, get some medication for that?
No, I think that what part of my certification is a coach for spiritual emergence. And so this is people who are feeling like they're going through an awakening of reality or perceptions. Like they have experienced something anomalous, like a peak experience. So this can be anything from, like you just mentioned, seeing those ghosts or elves or whatever, or an altered state of consciousness, or Kundalini awakening, or these things that you may not be as familiar or comfortable with, and you need someone to talk about with this topic. I personally, when I had an altered state of consciousness with psychedelics, it blew my mind, in a good way. And at the time, I had no one to talk to about it. And I did a little research about integration therapists. So one thing that has been really well done in the US is a lot of research in psychedelics and positive, safe ways to explore psychedelics has come out of all of these therapists who are qualified to help you understand your experience and really integrate it. Because it's one thing, I think my generation, maybe even more than your generation, has really been encouraged to collect experiences, right? And we did, especially pre-COVID, like we did it all. But then, like, now we have to integrate it. And some of us don't know how to do that. And so luckily for me, I had someone help me integrate this psychedelic experience into my psyche to understand, like, wow, that was trying to teach me about this, and this was trying to help me understand that. And I couldn't have done that without her. And so I felt so strongly about that. That's something that I wanted to help other people with. And so that's something that I have studied. And it's important to me because what I have found is when we have those peak experiences, we get a taste of the vertical dimension. And I can tell you what that is in a minute, but it's like, once you get a taste of the vertical dimension, you want to live in it all the time, and it's impossible. Right. So you have to be able to integrate that into your life and use the wisdom you've gotten in this amazing realm to give you meaning and purpose. And it is possible. You just need someone to help you sometimes.
Right.
Or give you the tools to do it yourself.
It's an interesting thing because for me, because some people think, oh, I want to experience this, I'm going to take psychedelics. And I'm like, well, I really haven't had a psychedelic experience ever. Yeah. And I feel like, I feel like it's certainly something to be a little bit careful of. I mean, I think they're amazing experiences, but you do sometimes really, you need therapy afterwards just to kind of like put it in some sort of frame and get your stability back on this world. I mean, I've had a couple of students over the years who's been the drug-induced psychosis, and they were retired at 20, 23. Right. They were, like, the state retired them and said, yeah, you'll never be able to work. Yeah. And it's partly because, I mean, I didn't know how to help them. So there's definitely two aspects. There's certain, I know there's a thing about, like, everybody's going, oh, you got to do ayahuasca, and it's like, no, you don't actually. Yeah, I can see sometimes it's a good experience, but I've met as many people who've had. I know I've met less people who go and say, oh, it's going to show you what you need to know, and mine was a horror trip. I needed a horror trip for whatever reason. And that was really terrible. I'm never doing that again. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, all right. So it is not necessary. It is going to show you sort of what you need to know. You know what? That is an amazing episode. We have got to have a psychedelic episode and talk about it from in more depth, because I think people like Carlos Castaneda and so on. What I felt with that was like, oh, he really had a guide. He really had somebody who was holding his hand the whole way.
Yeah.
And people now said, yeah, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to do that. And I'm like,
yeah, I don't think it's a party drug. I think
Yeah.
things with psychedelics is it's not a party drug, and it's more of an initiation, to be honest. I think it represents more of a ingestible initiation that in all likelihood, and I mean, mythology shows it, that was probably historically done in ceremonial aspects where it was a rite of passage and it was a initiation into this metaphysical realm or this other way of thinking about reality that allows you to see beyond the veil, right? And I think if you treat it like a party drug and you're doing it, you know, in a irresponsible way and in a way that doesn't honor what it's actually meant to give you, then it might take advantage of you and make you feel terrible, right? But I do feel like it's a wisdom teacher.
Yeah.
And I think through my own experiences and then also other altered states of consciousness that don't derive from drugs, but from meditation or hypnosis, or, you know, variety of things, you realize, okay, there's more than what we see, right? There's more than what we see. And we get tastes of it. And some people can do with the crumbs and they're fine. And some people want the whole pie, right? And I think everybody's in between. So it's like, if you don't want or ever need to feel like you're going to do a psychedelic or whatever, I think there's plenty of other ways to enter into these other realms that will give you the same taste.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a massive area.
We can talk about that forever. Yeah.
I think we're going to have to draw a line under part one. Okay. And I'd like to continue with you in part two. I don't know if you can do it like, you know, soon, so we can have them like sequentially, like in the
Sure.
But I mean, I just really want to thank you for taking the time today and sharing. Like, I mean, we've done a little bit of a deep dive in your background, but I want to do that because I think the stories that you've had as a child will be relatable by certain people or parents who've got kids who are that difficult child, and they're like, you know, I think perhaps even we call there's a certain percentage, let me be careful, there's a certain percentage of autism and Asperger that is perhaps related to this area. And you know, if you've given a parent an idea of how to deal with it, then that's really like pretty cool.
I think there's plenty of misdiagnoses that could be attributed to high sensitivity.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to understand as a parent, because like you mentioned, you might be preventing, especially the medicalization of treating something that is not necessarily symptomatic, it's not pathology, it's just a cluster of traits. And when really appreciated, you know, if your kid gets overstimulated, give him lots of breaks, right? Like that's just maintenance. Sometimes that's more helpful than medicine. And so just understanding this quality. And I think if you're a parent, I would recommend Dr. Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Child. If you're an adult, I would recommend Dr. Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person. And these books are the best primers, the best introductory of what it means to be highly sensitive, and you'll learn so much about yourself. And really, most of us who are sensitive, as soon as we read the introduction alone, you go, how did I not know this? How did I go X years without knowing this? And so I would recommend them. And then someday, when my book is free out in the world, I will recommend my book, The Sensitive Journey, but it's going to be a while before I finish it.
Yeah, well, take your time, but I think it's going to be, I mean, I'm just talking to you, I think it's going to be fascinating, even if it's just a series of your stories. One thing I'm interested to talk about, and we're going to have to put this off to next time, is talking about how a highly sensitive person perhaps perceives entities, and what's sort of because like once you go like there's something there, and everyone goes, no, there isn't. I'm like, I mean, I've been in the family constellation, and I've go, yeah, there's something there, just where that person isn't standing, just next to them, there is something there, and it's not being spoken of, and in that frame it was fine. But I mean, like, in so many other frames, like people are like, whoa, what, what's he taking, but
we can talk all about that. Yeah, I have
know
plenty of stories on that.
like we're going to be like talking for hours, which is so cool. So thank you very much for today, and
thank you.
let's do a pause.